Welcome back to Stories from the Ashes, where we pontificate on good books and the stories that define and refine us. I'm Amber, here with Amanda, and today we are joined by Nicole. Nicole runs the website Stories of Color, which you can find at storiesofcolor.com, and she is a Charlotte Mason mom, and she is currently world traveling with her kids. Nicole, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little more about your adventures?
Hello. Yes, thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, I'm really excited. I will take any chance to talk about books and these things that we love and we hold so dear. I have been homeschooling from the beginning, as they say. I have 3 kiddos. My oldest will be a sophomore, which does not feel real. My daughter, Riley, she's almost 16. Then I have my son, Tolan. He will be 14 next week, and he'll be a freshman in the fall. And then my youngest is 10, almost 11. Beckett, and he will be in 5th grade. And yeah, we've pretty much been Shirley Masoners from the beginning as well, maybe since about 1st grade for my oldest. And we have never looked back.
You are currently in the dark because it's night and we are in the day. So
Yes,
where are you?
We are. My family and I are in Cape Town, South Africa. We've been here for about 3.5 weeks already, which feels like we've been here for already 3 months. That's the way travel tends to go. So yeah, we sold our house, what we thought was going to be our forever home, about, I don't know, 5 months ago or so. And we had this plan in mind, and God planted it, and we couldn't shake it. And we said, let's do it. And we downsized, and we took full advantage of opportunity to travel and be gone for the summers. So we are here. This is our first big trip. And so it is nighttime here because it's 7:00 at night on the other side of the world right now. And we're having power outages, which is pretty common in South Africa. So if the power goes out in the middle, then, we got what we got.
That sounds hard, but rewarding.
Yeah. It's been interesting because, of course, we've had lots of good conversations about being thankful for living in a country where our power doesn't just shut off. And it's been interesting talking to South Africans who are like, wait, that doesn't happen in America? This is not a common occurrence. And we're like, no, not unless, there's a storm or something significant. And it's pretty interesting to hear their perspective. I mean, they're annoyed by it too. So, they don't love it. And it's hard for them to imagine living somewhere where that doesn't happen. So, yeah.
Is South Africa your first stop on your travels? Or have you been somewhere else?
Yeah, this summer. We've taken the kids overseas before. We've gone to parts of Europe, but this was the first big trip with a long stay in one place. And we really wanted to try to be in a place where we could make it feel like we lived there. Like we wanted to experience the culture and people, and we wanted to have the time to really explore and get to know the area. And so we've connected with a church here, and our kids have been going to youth group, and just, those kinds of things where you can feel like you're really getting to know a place. And so next summer we have plans for other countries, but for this summer, we're just going to stick here.
Cool. Yeah. If people are curious and want to follow along with your travels, your Instagram pictures have been lovely. And I loved the tour of the Victorian house that you're staying in.
Yeah, I'm trying to share a little bit here and there. So yeah, it's really fun. I'm not the most consistent Instagrammer, but I'm trying to keep people really want to see. And I think it's fun. It's fun and inspiring, hopefully, to see. And a lot of people have already messaged me saying, we really want to do this too. How did you get started? How are you traveling? So I've had some good conversations with other homeschool families. And I think that's the stuff too. I love it.
So is your plan to come back to the States for the fall?
Yeah, we'll be back in August, and just back to normal life and back to school and all the things. We're doing some schooling here, actually. But then hopefully some other little trips throughout the year that we already have planned. And then we'll do another bigger, longer summer chunk next summer. Yeah.
That's the great thing about CM. It seems Charlotte Mason style seems to go really well with travels and just.
Yes, absolutely.
Life.
It's so easy. Yeah, it just naturally is a part of how we already think about the world. So it's putting some of it into practice, but they already have that natural curiosity, and they have all of these things that they're already pulling from things that they know already about history and people. And it's really cool to get to see it kind of come full circle for them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Amanda was asking last night, she's like, I read that she loves animals. How do you love animals and travel? That seems very challenging.
We're getting ready to go out of town for a week, and the animal stuff's just like blowing my mind.
No, it's really sad. Actually, I was just messaging a friend. She was asking how we were doing, how we're feeling about being here. And I said, I feel like we're doing okay. We've had little moments of homesickness. I said, honestly, the thing I miss most are my pets and the grocery store. Grocery stores here are really throwing me. They're all very different, and it's hard to get one thing you need everything you need at one store. So I feel like I'm going to lots of places, but besides that, I miss my pets a lot. And we have a really great friend who is staying in our home and pet sitting for us. So it's the only thing that's giving me comfort. I know they're being well loved. But I definitely miss my dogs and my cat. Yeah, for sure.
How many do you have?
We have 2 dogs and 1 cat, and we had another cat, but we had to recently, unfortunately, rehome her when we moved for my son's allergies. But she went to a great family member. So, but I would have them all if my husband would let me, but it's just not the cards. He's like, he jokes. He's like, I never thought I would be Dr. Dolittle. I can't believe we have so many pets. I love them all. I know, it's really not.
That's really funny.
Not. That's right. I'm just telling you that.
It's not that funny. I told Eric the other day that if I had never gotten married, I would definitely be one of those crazy cat women, because I don't know that I could 100%. Ever say no to another cute kitten. And he's like, so I saved you. I'm like, oh, it's all relative, you know? Like, I'm not saying it would be terrible to be a crazy old cat lady.
No, I kids joke all the time. They know. They're like, Mom, if you never married Dad, you would be that person. I don't deny it. I'm like, I would be alone in
I would be fine. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yep. So we always try to ask our guests to share 3 of their favorite books with us, just to get to know them.
Oh, yes.
So either they could be 3 of your favorite books or 3 books that were influential. Sometimes those aren't the books that we like as much, but we know that they were powerful.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my gosh. That's so hard.
It is.
Okay, let me think. One that comes to my mind, I think no matter what, it'll probably always hold a place in my top 10 is Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. And that book was gifted to me from one of my best friends. And I hadn't read it. I don't know why. It was just one that I had never read. And I read it in 2020. And that in light of that year and the difficulty of that year for all of us, reading that book was like this kind of anchor to my soul. And it's just, I love it. So I think about that book a lot, and I think that one will probably always be up there. Most influential, or gosh, that's so hard too. I'm trying to.
You can always change your mind later, so it's not a set in stone forever thing.
I know. Yes. Okay. A book that these are all kind of more recent, but a book that I've recently read that really influenced me in such a positive way and that I shared with so many friends was Braiding Sweetgrass. Have I read
not.
Braiding Sweetgrass?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen it. I've seen it recommended, but I haven't read any reviews.
Yeah. It is so joyous. It's written by a woman who is she's a Indigenous woman. And she is also a professor she's a botanist. Is that right? Professor of botany. It's essentially like adult nature lore. And it is so beautiful. It's like all of this real science with nature, and I don't know, it just blew my mind. I've never read a book like it. And I recommend it to a lot of friends and a lot of Charlotte Masoners. And even if like spiritually, maybe it's not exactly in line with what a lot of us would necessarily believe, it's still, it points to a career. And I just loved it. So that book, I would say more recently, definitely influenced me a lot.
So is that Since she's Indigenous, is it more
Mhm.
North American
Yes. So
focus?
she's, it's North America. It's not Canadian. She's not Canadian. Yes, Canada's North America. I'm in the United
I
States. Is
knew
that
what
what
you
you
meant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, in North America, in the United States, she's in, I can't remember what state she lives in. But yeah, the book takes place in the United States.
Okay.
And she lives in the States, and I can't even remember what school she teaches at. I'm not remembering any of those details, but yeah. And she's a mother too, and she has daughters. And so she even weaves in these beautiful stories of mothering and how so much of mothering mirrors what we see in nature and what we
Uh-huh.
see in creation. And it's just really, really beautiful. So yeah, I love that one. And one more, let's like an easy one. Gosh, I don't know. I just finished a book. I just finished a book by Colson Whitehead called The Nickel Boys. And I don't know if it's necessarily one of my favorites, but I just think it's important. And I think his work is really important. He wrote The Underground Railroad, which was just turned into a film or television series, I think. But the Nickel Boys won the Pulitzer in 2020, I believe. And it's just a really important story. And it's about two Black boys who found themselves at essentially like a reform school for boys. And it's based on true story. That a school that actually existed in the United States where, there was a lot of abuse that took place. And it's not like an uplifting book by any means. I mean, that's not true. It has an uplifting message, but it's also hard truth. And it's really beautiful. And I just think it's one of those kinds of pieces of literature that I wish more people would read. It's not always fun to sit down and read those books, but I think they're really valuable and they're worth our time. And they create really great conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am sorry.
Yeah.
You guys were freezing up for me. My husband told me earlier when he was printing something for me, he's like, the internet's a little wonky today. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So that was great. I was wondering, does the book end with hope?
It does actually. Well, the epilogue does.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last chapter is really, I was telling my husband, I said, I actually kind of don't want to finish this book because I know where it's going and I can feel the pain. I can feel the heartache that's building and I don't actually want to get to the end. But the epilogue, there is definitely hope. There's Martin Luther King Jr.'s sermons are actually woven throughout the book. And that is kind of this echoing hope throughout the story of the opportunity to rise above hate and to actually choose love and actually love our enemies in this really supernatural way, because these are boys who are not in any position to be loving the people that are abusing them. And they talk about like, this feels like an impossible thing. And I think, well, it is an impossible thing on our own. And that's sort of part of the message. So it's really powerful. Yeah.
That sounds really powerful. Have you read the picture book, Sweetgrass?
I know it. Do I have that one? Yeah, I have it on Stories of Color site, but I do know it. Yeah, people love that book.
I read it last week, and I thought of it when you mentioned the other Sweetgrass book.
It's really great. Well, she talks so much in Braiding Sweetgrass about the significance of sweetgrass itself in certain tribes, and I didn't know. I mean, not really. I didn't really know the cultural significance, and it's so beautiful when you really understand why this is so important and why it's meant to be protected. And it really opens up your eyes to so many other things when you are, seeing through the eyes of someone who grew up understanding the tradition and the importance of that thing.
Yeah, definitely. So your database, Stories of Color, what need were you looking to fill in the creation of your database?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think for just years, I had friends reach out to me just randomly and say, Nicole, do you know of a book from this time period about this people group? And I would say, sure, maybe you could try this book. And I would maybe recommend something, or I wouldn't know a book, and I would say, I have no idea, and I will have to find one, and I will look with you, and we will try to find a book from the, ancient Korea. I don't know, some piece of literature. And so part of it came out of a need for myself. Like it was purely selfish because I kept thinking, I wish that there was this database. I think I complained to my husband for like a solid 5 years of like, why is there nothing online for like living books of color? Like, where are those books? And he was like, well, you should do it. And I was like, yeah. Okay.
No, you would think that you could Google such things, but
right. You
Google's
really
no
can't.
help.
No, it's not. It really wasn't. And so I think over just compiling my own lists over the years and answering and trying to help my friends do the same, I thought, man, maybe I should just try and start a list and do it myself. And so I really was meeting a need for myself and for my friends, for my inner circle of friends. And then I just thought, well, I know Charlotte Masoners and just the homeschool community at large. We are so particular about books and good books and living books, and we want to get our hands on the right books for our children. And no one, I think, does that quite like Charlotte Masoners. And so I really wanted it to serve that community in a way that would be, easy and straightforward and practical. And if I couldn't use it, then if I have to be able to use it or no one's going to use it because I'm not a tech savvy person. And so that was kind of where it came from. And one day my husband came to me and said, I think I found the way we can do it. Like he found the software essentially that we could use to create the site. And then we just took off and we did it together.
Isn't it great doing it together? That's very similar to Eric and I with the Reshelving Alexandria database. He came to me and he's like, hey, Notion made some changes recently so we can finally do what you've been wanting to do and you can do it. And I was like, I can do it? Me? Me, the least tech savvy person in this house? So
I would pretty much say the same. I mean, Jonathan is my husband, but he definitely had to give me some real tutorials. We spent some time so that I would understand on the back end how to do it. I still don't do a lot of the things he does, but he's an entrepreneur and he's always had companies, and we've never really worked on a project together. So this was the first time we did a thing together, and it was really, really fun. And we fought way less than I thought we would have over the thing.
Isn't that wonderful?
We got along pretty well for the whole process.
It's having a shared goal. It really helps.
It does.
Yeah. It was a really good, healthy distraction at the time from other things. And, we started in 2021. And so I think people were still reeling from 2020. Yeah. And it was really good for us. It was just a really happy project for us to work on. And we would do it on our free time together. And it was really good because of that too.
Yeah, I love it.
I feel like I'm still reeling from 2020.
Yes, that's what I think a lot of us still are. Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to share something. So I know that people always talk about books and windows, or books as windows and mirrors, where you can see into someone else's life or see your own life reflected back. And May Lamberton Becker, who is one of my favorite newspaper editors from history, she wrote the Reader's Guide of the Saturday Review of Literature in the newspaper for years. But in 1929, she wrote this book. I don't know if you've seen it, called Books as Windows. And she basically is talking about that, but I just want to read the foreword real fast for people because I think it really just speaks to what you're doing. She says, there was a woman in search of an apartment in my city who found 2 of which she could take her choice. The rooms in one were large and commanded a view of the other side of a narrow street. Those of the other were small and on the top floor, overlooking an uptown park, so that from the windows you could see over treetops and rooftops far across the island to the blue beyond. She chose the small one, saying, the other has more room for the furniture, but this has more room for me. And she added, no room can be really crowded if it has a window with a view. Books may make windows like that. You can look not only into them, but through them, sometimes for a long way. Sometimes they open on a vista of centuries past, and sometimes into the haze of the future. Some of them are, quote, magic casements opening on the foam of perilous seas in fairylands forlorn, end quote. And some look straight into your neighbor's dooryard. No life need be crowded if it can look out and get its bearings in time and in space. And in this time of transition and changing concepts, still now, right? This time in 1929, this time now. The only way for most of us to get our bearings is through books. If I have added one more to their number, it is to share with other readers one reader's experience in looking into life through literature. And I just really feel that that's what you are trying to do with your site, is keep track of all those different cultures and experiences and help people to look through those windows that for the people they would be windows for, and then also for the kids that they would be mirrors to. And I really think that's, think it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really well said. I mean, I think, we definitely hear the books as mirrors and windows referenced a lot. And I know Amber O'Neill Johnston, she is like, the Charlotte Mason with an afro. She talks so much about that, and she does such a great job talking about that, and she's really helped make that topic, I think, more widespread within the Charlotte Mason community. And I'm really grateful for her work in doing that. I grew up not really ever seeing anyone reflected in literature or film or television that looked like me. I'm biracial. I have a Black dad and a white mom. And, I can't even think of a single character in anything who was biracial. And, when we talk about the power of books and the power of stories, like, we want our children to grasp onto these ideas of character and truth and wisdom and beauty. And it is a lot easier to do that when there are some of those characters that look something like you, where there's a piece of you that can relate to them in a way that maybe you couldn't in another character. And so when I started homeschooling and thinking through, gosh, well, I want my children's books to be still reflective of our family culture and our family heritage, and I couldn't find those books. And a lot of Charlotte Mason curriculum, tended to be really homogenous, and I was very discouraged, and I spent a lot of time looking for books. And I really wanted us to have reflective literature. But then at the same time, as you're saying, windows, that is the other beautiful thing about them. Like, books literally can transport you, as we know, not literally, they can transport you, as we know, and they can send us to another place, and they can let us peek inside of other people's lives and cultures and all these other beautiful things. And I think that, your question you asked earlier, what was kind of my goal in starting Stories of Color? I really wanted to lower the bar for how difficult it can be to find those books. Like, I wanted people to have access to them much more easily. They were like, I really want to find this thing, and I don't want to do all this work, because sometimes that slows us down. Maybe we'd be less inclined to read those books if we have to work harder to find them. I wanted to just make that process simpler for people, and I hope that that's part of what it's been doing. But they are really powerful tools, and that will never change. Books and windows and mirrors, that's forever going to be true. And I love that.
We're certainly going to read fewer of them if they're so difficult to find.
Right.
Have you found that they're getting easier to find at all, or are they still super hard to find?
I think that's a good question. I think in certain categories, there's been a real influx of books that wouldn't have been easily is found earlier, like, say, Pacific Islander books, or books on, like, Inuit community, as an example, where traditionally those books have just been, there's much fewer of them, and for lots of reasons. But sometimes when a culture is like an oral tradition culture, those stories just are not being written down, or they hadn't been historically written down. And so I see some changes in that. Like, there are definitely more publications coming out in certain categories, but then in other categories, or in other countries or cultures, they just aren't there. And there are just these gaps where I love to like go onto the website and look at like data points and kind of go through which countries are really being well represented and which people groups aren't, and how can I help fill in some of those gaps. And sometimes they don't exist.
Like what countries are those, or what people groups are those?
Well, I mean, certain, indigenous tribes, for example, that's another oral tradition, people groups. And there are so many different indigenous tribes beyond what we commonly know, that there just aren't books for certain groups of people. They just don't exist. That might be changing, but for some, that's really slim. But there are even some Asian countries where they're just really difficult to find certain books for, like books about like Laos or, even Cambodia. You think there'd be more of those, but there really aren't very many. And also then you get into like, are they quality books? Are they, there's a lot of like twaddle books like that, or books that I just would not personally give my children. But are they quality living books? Probably not. And that's a whole nother area where you feel the gap of, is it like a book that someone wrote just to check a box? Or is that a book that someone wrote with care and intentionality that's quality? That's different. Yeah.
Are there
Do you find that publishers are still writing books to check boxes? And I'm assuming if they're writing books to check boxes, they're written by people who are not of that culture.
Yeah. I saw a statistic the other day, and I won't get it completely right, so I wish I had it in front of me, but it said something like 80% of the last few years of children's books that were published were still about white children. So, that's a huge percentage still. So it's still really, there's still a huge disparity within publishing. And I know that is improving, and I know that's getting better. I see it every month. I see people releasing these books that, are written. Well, there's the whole Own Voices movement, which are all books that are being written, by a person that's representative of that culture of which they're writing about. And I think we're just going to continue to see more and more of that, which is awesome. Again, are they all quality that I would put in front of my kids? Not necessarily. I still would rather those books exist personally, but I wouldn't necessarily put them on Stories of Color's site, and I wouldn't necessarily use them on homeschool. But again, I would still rather a child have an opportunity to at least pick them up somewhere and see a book that's represented.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I saw on your site that you have a section on diverse living books, including neurodiverse and differently abled perspectives. And I thought that was really exciting. Do you find that there's big gaps in your ability to find those books outside of picture books, like into middle grade and
there are definitely fewer of those I've seen. Although again, I think that is definitely an area that's becoming, I think that's an area where more books are being published as well. There's definitely not as many for sure. But like, when you think about even the conversation around autism from where it is now, from where we were growing up, we've come a really long way in destigmatizing it and having open conversations about it and having books available for kids. So I think those things will continue to improve. I think around areas like ADHD, anxiety, even PTSD, I've been seeing some of those kinds of books written more for children. It's harder to find those in like a quality level piece of literature per se. But I do think that's going to continue to improve. That's my hope anyway. I think that will continue to get better.
Yeah. Have you read the book? It's not diverse, but just speaking of anxiety being represented, have you read the book Give and Take?
I have not.
It's so good.
No.
So I'm just going to review it real fast because I did in one of our episodes, I said it was a book I had started. So now I have finished it and I absolutely loved it. So the little girl has gone through a lot of big life changes really fast, including her grandmother passing away from dementia. And as part of watching her grandma forget things, she doesn't want to forget anything. And so she is keeping mementos from everything: the empty candy wrapper, the bottle lid, the rock, the, the shell casing, because she's a trap shooter, and she just has these boxes under her bed. And it's this beautiful middle grade fiction that shows wonderful family relationships, positive sibling relationships, and how supportive the parents are in getting her into therapy and seeing a therapist. And I had not seen that in any middle grade fiction so far, like a kid going to therapy and the process of what it is and how she struggles with that. And then watching her struggle with telling her family members beyond her parents, and then telling her friends. And the other thing that I loved that this book did was, there's a situation where one of her friends, who feels like the less than of the kids in her family, like her one sister excels at everything and she really struggles, she's getting ready to cheat at a trap shoot to increase her advantage. And the main character finds out, and she's like, you can't do this. And she's like, what do you even care? Like, I'm going to do it. And the main character's dad is their trap shoot coach. And she goes to him and she's like, I don't want to tell you this, but like, I know it puts our whole team at danger and it puts the wildlife at danger if she uses this specific type of shell that she wants to use. And so she tells him, and the girl gets sent home. And so this divides their friend group, because some of the girls go with the friend, some of the girls go with the original girl. And the book doesn't end with it resolved. Like, it shows this is sometimes the consequence of doing the right thing. So there's still this division. There's hope. There's like, she still has hope that someday there will be some reconciliation when her friend like completely cools off, but it doesn't end there. Like, it ends in that unknowing that is so real when you stand up and do the right thing. So when my dad passed away, my daughter, who was 6 at the time, did the hoarding for about a year. We couldn't even throw away Kleenex boxes. Anything that had been in our house when Grandpa Bob had last visited, she didn't want to let go, because it was part of her memories of him. And as she got rid of these things, she would get rid of the memories. And I didn't know what to do about it, but I just trusted the process. And I was like, if we give her time and give her space, I know we'll get to the point of healing. And this is just her grieving. And so I'm really glad that I did that. And she did get to the place where she could part with that stuff. But I was really concerned that this was going to be some lifelong struggle, and she would never be able to let things go. But she was the one comforting me when we had the house fire. And she's like, it's okay. Like, I know my whole bedroom's gone. It's okay. It's going to be fine. So just being able to see that journey of how we go through our grief, go through our struggles, and we can come out stronger on the other side. And I really saw that reflected in this book.
That sounds that sounds beautiful. Also, what an amazing gift in a book of something that your daughter had even gone through, that they ended up writing similar. That's amazing. What a gift.
Yeah.
I think too, for middle schoolers, I mean, gosh, middle school is hard enough as it is. So to have a book that's more honest about the way things can actually go down between friendships, because this is what will inevitably happen at some point. Giving them an honest picture, a good, healthy picture of that at such a critical time, that's really, really good. I love that.
I love that book.
Yeah.
So the
I'm gonna look at it.
It's really good. So what holes are really standing out to you right now in your database that you are just actively waiting for someone to have written a book into, or hoping that somebody finds a vintage book that already exists that fills the hole? Because if our readers know of any, they could message you.
Well, that's another thing too, is anyone can submit books on to Stories of Color. I know you guys know that, but anyone can submit a book through our submission form. And we have a fair amount of submissions, but it's open. If you've read a book and you think this is a really great book and I would really love to share this with other people, and I wish other families knew about this book, you can we have like a super quick submission form. It takes like 1 minute. or you can be fancy and you can do the long submission version, which saves me whatever you want to do. Either way. Yeah. So I think I would always, I shouldn't say I would always prefer an older book. I really do love, an older book. And unfortunately, there are a lot of gaps, as we know, because there were a lot of voices that were silenced throughout history that groups were not allowed, they weren't given opportunity to write their stories. And so there will inevitably be a big gap, say in like African-American books from, the 1800s and the early 1900s. Those books are not there, and they're not there for a reason. And so I think there's being mindful of that, and then also saying, okay, well, what can I look at in terms of like contemporary work that's going to help fill in those gaps from those time periods? There are certain other groups that, I mentioned Indigenous groups. I think even Canadian First Nations books, I'm seeing more of those, but I'm still always on the lookout for really quality First Nations books. And then, even in Europe, I think those books are kind of hard because I generally only pull books of people of color. So in Europe, there are like pockets, but those books are really hard to find. So like, say, I don't know, Muslim stories from France. I don't have like that specific category is not filled in as an example. I don't know those books. And so they might not be there, or I just haven't found them. So there are like little pockets, but I think holistically, I feel pretty good about where we're at. And it's, it's a living thing. It's always growing. It's always changing. I still take books away. I like look through them, or I get them in the mail, and then I get my hands on them and say, oh no, this is not quality, or this isn't, I don't really think this should be on there, or whatever. So that happens too. So it is a living, growing thing. And I think that's part of the cool part about it.
Yeah. With this having been a project that you had in mind for a long time, and your husband found something that worked, but what are some of the things that you still are hoping to add at some point?
Oh yeah. So we've been slowly working on a film list.
Nice.
Which is kind of, my husband is a really big film nerd, and he'll say it like he's a film nerd. And so he kind of took the reins on that on the side and was like, hey, do you think I could start like compiling a list of documentaries and films? And I was like, that would be amazing. So he's already put together a pretty good list already. The other tricky part, or time consuming, I should say, is we want to be able to link all of those films or documentaries to books. So like if you pulled up a film about Martin Luther King Jr. as an example, Selma, that's a film, like high schoolers could watch that. You would pull up that film on the site, and ideally you would be able to look and find like 5 books that could correspond to that movie. So that's kind of what we're working on right now. I've also been working on some bundles. I don't know if that's the name I'm going to stick with, but that's what they're being called right now. So kind of just like grab and go packs for people who are like, hey, I really want to start. I don't know where to start. What are the top 10 books I should read for I'll say form 2 to grade 2 through 4 from the 1800s. And then
that would be amazing.
Like that stack exists, and people could just find those books, those top 10. Because I know a lot of people are like, where do I start? What books do I start with? How do I add more diversity to what I'm already doing? Which is, it's actually really pretty easy. But it's finding the books, right? It's like, well, what do I actually start reading? What do I supplement with? So hopefully kind of making that process easier too is a goal. And, and then there's a couple other little things, but I'll just say those two for now.
Those two are really exciting.
So how do you recommend people start adding more diverse books to their lives?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Well, I have on the, I think it is on the website, but I know it's on my Instagram. I just called the 135 method because it makes sense to me, but if you just pick one subject, this is what I always tell people, if you pick one subject to start with, like say there are certain subjects that's much easier to add in, diverse books. So let's just say historical fiction. That's a really easy one, right? So you pick historical fiction, so you pick one subject, And assuming you have 3 terms for your school year, if you sub in 1 book for each term of historical fiction, that's more diverse title, that would be 3 books for the year. But if you did that for 5 subjects, say you picked poetry, geography, historical fiction, biography, and I don't know.
You can do science. There's some really good scientists.
Science, sure, yeah.
I don't know how you do math. Math seems hard.
Science is definitely a little bit of a gap for I feel. Pick science. If you did that, if you
I fell madly in love with George Washington Carver as a kid. So I'm like, pick the science field.
Yeah.
There are more of those books now too, for sure. There's so many good ones now. Like Latimer, there's books about Latimer who worked with Thomas Edison, and those books did not exist when we were growing up. So, Lewis Latimer. Okay. So if you did that for 5 subjects, you would add 15 diverse books a year, which is pretty awesome. And it's pretty you don't even have to start with that many. You could just do 2 subjects and add 6 books a year. And I think by the end, people would be like, oh yeah, this is really doable and pretty easy to manage. And just swap out another book and add one in.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Good method. And so you're saying on Instagram, you have like slides that walk people through those ideas.
I have somewhere, I know it's not pinned, but I think under my planning highlights, I have that is pinned on there. Pinned, I don't even know if that's what you call it, but it's on there on my highlights under planning. And it is on the website. On the Stories of Color website, there are some guides too that people can download. One of them is how to add diversity to your homeschool. There's another guide that's, all of this is free too, I should say. I hope that's given, but this is all free. This is just, I would love for families to have access to this. There's another guide to analyzing literature for racism and bias, as an example. And it's like 10 steps. It's really, they're so helpful. I did not write it, but a way to just automatically scan your literature, whatever you're using for in your schooling, to just look for these 10 things. And it's been really helpful for me. And so it was written by University of Arizona. So I pulled that, and that's on the site. So things like that, you could just look at, and they are really easy to hopefully implement and add. Yeah.
I love that. So this question is just, it might be one of those questions where you get it and you're like, I could have answered it if you didn't ask me. Because that's how I feel all the time. It's like, I could have told you this if you didn't actually ask me. Yeah. So what are a few of your kids' favorite books that they have read in the last few months?
Yes, I can answer that. I probably know my kids' favorite books more than I can pick my own, because I don't know why that is, but that is true. Okay, my children. So my children's favorite books. Okay, they're all, my older 2 are Harry Potter kids. It's through and through. Love Harry Potter. Family books that we've loved together. Let's see. Oh gosh. Well, now I'm blanking. But no. Princess and the Goblin. The Princess and the Goblin is a real family favorite. We loved, one of our other family favorites is Jackie Robinson in the Year of the Boar. Do you guys know that book?
Yeah,
I have not read it, but I know the title.
Added it to our shelves last year, so hopefully we'll do it.
Yeah, it's such a good one. It's about a little girl who immigrates to the United States from China, and she is delightful, and she is just learning American culture and just figuring out her place in the world. And then she discovers Jackie Robinson. She discovers baseball, and then she discovers Jackie Robinson, and then America comes alive to her, and she relates to Jackie Robinson as an outsider, and how his story makes her feel comforted as an immigrant. Anyway, it's a hilarious book, which it's really hard to have like that serious of a topic and it'd be so funny. Yeah. And it's written by an Asian author, by a Chinese author. It's a really great one. My middle son just finished the Tristan Strong series. I don't know if you guys know those books, but they're really cool. He really loved them. They're kind of a take on African folk tales, and it's a boy who has superpowers, but he doesn't know that he has them. And then he's like, they like come alive, and it pulls all of these different African folk tales together, like John Henry and other things, and African American and African, I should say. It pulls them all together, and then he gets to like, fight bad guys. It's like a perfect middle school boy book.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I don't know, we have some others, that we all love, but those are just a few, that I can think of right now.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you. I'll have to look into the your son's books for my daughter. It sounds like something she would enjoy.
Yeah, they're really fun. Yeah.
Very nice. Amanda, did you have any other questions or things you wanted to cover?
I was really curious if you said you've been dreaming of the database for a long time. Does it look like what you dreamed of originally, or has that morphed over time?
That's a good question. I think it does. I think visually, there's some other things like I've dreamt of being able to do that. My husband is a tech guy, so he probably feels the same. Like there's some other things we could really do visually, aesthetically, just like pure aesthetics. This isn't necessarily practical. That maybe we'll get to. For now, I do feel really happy and proud of where it is. And I think once you kind of get to know how to use it, like there's a little bit of a learning curve. I wish there wasn't quite as much of a learning curve given the software that we use. But I think once you use it a couple of times, it's really simple.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh yeah, I could totally do this. And I have friends who like me are not tech savvy, and they text me and they're like, I'm totally using it. I got it. I figured it out. I can do it. So that's good. So yeah, I think in that way, but I'm sure down the road, I would love to make it prettier, but I do think it's pretty for right now.
I like it. It's simple. It's clean. I like the way it looks.
Yeah. Thank you.
I do too.
I do that. Yeah. That's on my husband. So he designed all of the site.
He did a great job. Yeah. So we run a family-friendly show here, and you have a not family-friendly podcast that is definitely for adults.
Yeah, that's correct.
So while staying family-friendly, could you tell us who your podcast is for in case we have anyone who would like to check it out?
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about Nova. My podcast is called Not Only But Also, and I podcast with my best friend Renee Ronica Bahati Klug, doctor, I should say. She just got her PhD.
Congratulations!
So I gotta throw that doctor in there. Yes, it's a really big deal. We talk about the intersection of faith and the church and culture, and we are both biracial women, and so we speak a lot about race in the church, around all of those kinds of topics. It is definitely not for children. We talk about a lot of
yes.
Have kids' ears around, marriage, relationships, all those kinds of things as well. So it's really us. It's really through our eyes as biracial women of faith. Some of our interpretations of what we're seeing, and it's really just two friends talking. I mean, you guys know it's like it's two friends sitting down and hashing stuff out together.
Yes. Yeah. We'll go ahead and add the link to your podcast in the show notes as well. But did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about or cover that maybe you touched on, but then as you've been sitting, you're like, oh, I wanted to say more.
No, I just wanted to say, I wanted to tell you guys, Reshelving Alexandria was honestly one of my like super back in the day inspirations. I think that I remember I must have been like on a Facebook page somewhere, and someone like shared Reshelving Alexandria, and I remember thinking, what is this? What is this amazing name? And I went, and I remember like geeking out, and so I think like to just say like I'm fangirling too, like what was really created, like these are all of the pieces that get put together to create this really vibrant community that we all get to participate in. And all of it builds on itself, right? It's all building towards this kind of common goal. And we're doing it through our love of books and books as windows and mirrors, like we were talking about. And so, I just want to thank you for your work, because it definitely like helps spark stories of color, years before I even realized that I had made that connection. But all of it is so important. So I appreciate
Yeah, you're welcome. We really appreciate being able to help connect people to the right books, and I've really enjoyed all the books that I've read that I never would have read for myself, that I've read for the community's sake in order to be able to review them, and just how many more diverse books I've been able to read and how many more experiences and windows I've looked through that I probably wouldn't have if I just stayed in reading books for personal comfort and entertainment. So
Absolutely.
It's so
yeah.
good.
So thank you so much for giving us your time. And we're going to wrap this up before your outage starts so we don't just go to a blank screen.
Yeah, just in time.
But we want to thank everyone for spending your time with us. And there will be a whole bunch of links in the show notes to all the projects that Nicole has going and her Instagram, so you can see the gorgeous Victorian house that she's staying in. And it's so pretty. I love the fireplace. Is it a working fireplace?
Yes, there's two of them and they both work. Yeah,
wonderful.
We've had them on every night.
Yeah, I love that. And so there will be all the books that we talked about in the show notes and on our database in the Stories from the Ashes chapter of that database. You'll be able to find the books that we talked about today. And remember that the stories are truer than true. Go drink some water and we will see you next time.